How does it fit into economics in general? Well, my own research in empirical microeconomics has focused on understanding the employment, earnings and savings decisions of families and individuals, in particular how families are impacted by adverse economic conditions and how policy can best be designed to mitigate these adverse events. The aim is to provide an empirical foundation to address many of the key questions in economics. How are savings decisions made? What determines employment and retirement? What factors drive inequality and poverty? And so on. These research contributions, by the way, stem from a growing availability of microdata in the 1980s and now extensively developed. And they were motivated by the importance of developing a rigorous evidence-based analysis of the impact and design of public policies, in my particular case, of tax and welfare policies. A good question. Well, my research is driven in part by policy questions. They stimulate all of our work really deep down, but also by a curiosity to understand the behaviour of individuals and families, really with the idea that by understanding behaviour better, we can design better policies, make the economy work better. And in that sense, driven all the time by important social issues. And the economy is changing all the time, throwing up new issues, new problems. And it's an ever-changing world, and it's an ever-changing economics that needs to be brought to bear on that world. And the excitement of empirical microeconomics is really getting down to the way the microeconomy works, how people live and interact in their own individual lives. Another good question. Well, I've always believed strongly, and I think this has been borne out by research and policy together, that you can't do good policy without really understanding behaviour. And to understand behaviour, you have to do it in a way that really respects what's going on in the data, what people are actually doing, not bringing to bear unnecessary assumptions. It's a very complicated world people are making decisions in, and you need to reflect that in your models of behaviour. But microeconomics itself brings a kind of logic, a formulation, a way of thinking about the interactions between people in firms, in their workplaces, in families. It brings a kind of logic. Together with the data, it can generate the most incredibly enlightening, insightful models with which to deal with policy. Oh, well, you can't underestimate the importance of large data, certainly in what I do. It's all based on microdata, that is data that surveys, longitudinal surveys that follow individuals, that are linked with administrative surveys, perhaps on their schooling behaviour, on their visits to hospitals, to doctors, and their earnings in firms, their pension contributions. If you put all this together, you might stand some chance of really understanding what's going on. So the big data revolution, in the sense that we can now access large amounts of individual data, has been absolutely critically important in the development of this work. But that alone isn't really enough. What's happened at the same time, and we've certainly contributed to this, has been the development of new, what we call microeconometric techniques. That's methods, computer methods really, or computer models, for trying to elicit what's going on, to try and figure out what's going on in the world we're looking at with all that data, to try and bring, in a sense, you know, some logic to the data in a way that will help us understand behavior. So the development of statistical techniques, microeconometric techniques, for studying the dynamics of the world we live in at the micro level has been another fundamental thing that's allowed us to develop this work. And of course we've contributed quite enormously to that development. Well, you've got to be optimistic in this world, and you have to think you're having some impact on the wider society. That's, in a sense, why we're here. We might do it through many different ways, but I think looking back over the years, I think we've been motivated very strongly by social issues and by trying to design improved welfare and tax policy. And I hope that we've had my research and the research of my colleagues who've worked with me has had some impact, some noticeable impact, perhaps most obviously through my interaction with the unique Institute for Fiscal Studies, where I've been research director for nearly 30 years, and which really gives us a leverage into the policy domain, into the policy making domain, so we can really understand the issues and have some influence in policy. Of course, perhaps most of the time what the best influence we have is in just stopping stupid policies happening by pointing out that they're really not the best policies to choose.